So in this video, we're going to be talking about how historians organize history itself, and this is going to form the basis for much of what we talk about going forward. So take a look. One of the basic ways that history is organized, of course, is calendars. And, most people will be familiar, of course, with the calendar that's used in everyday life in the Western world, the Christian calendar, which is organized around the supposed date of the birth of Christ. So we are currently, more than 2,000 years on from that. And the Christian way of designating that is in the year of our Lord, Anno Domini, AD. And so you would say the year 2000, the year 2015 AD. All of ancient history pretty much is taking place before the supposed birth of Christ, and so this is referred to in the Christian calendar as BC, before Christ. I'm saying all of this, which you already know, because historians tend to use a common era calendar, which is not tied to the idea of the Christian religion, because obviously not everybody in the world is Christian. And so the period that covers the last 2015 years is the Common Era, CE, and everything before that is before the Common Era, BCE. So in some of the materials for this course, you'll see things referred to as BC. In some cases, you'll see BCE, which is the Common Era, or politically correct, or however you want to think of it. The key thing to be aware of is that everything that's BCE is counting up to the beginning of the Common Era or Christian calendar. Everything in the BCE before the Common Era is counting up to that dividing line. And so this has the effect of the years essentially going backwards. And so it's important to bear in mind that the year 400 BCE comes before the year 200 BCE, and so on. If all this bothers you, that we're still using the Christian calendar, then you can take some solace in the fact that it's since been determined that Christ was actually born in the year 6 BCE. So all of this is arbitrary anyway. It's a means of organizing the information that we look at about the past. Historians divide the past, the history that we study, into chunks, and the largest of these are eras of human history. This is called periodization, dividing things into periods, and there are some upsides and downsides to this. Obviously, the upside is that everything is going to be neatly organized and consolidated into little boxes, and we can look at one box at a time, one bucket at a time. And this is convenient if you're focusing in on a particular place and period and so forth. The problem with this is, and I'm sure you can imagine this, the problem is going to be what? The problem is going to be that you are now making a broad generalization about everything in this bucket. It's defined in a certain way. Everything across this particular period, from year X to year Y, that you define this bucket, and every place within it, from one city to the next, one country to the next, you're trying to make these broad generalizations. Everything in this bucket is defined in a certain way. And so as you're thinking about this, as you're using these periods, you should be aware of this drawback. You should be aware that it encourages generalizations that you have to be sure that you're not making. So these periods are usually defined by transformation, by some kind of change. In general, history is the study of change. It's the description of how things are transformed by stimuli, by things that happen within a community, or by conflict and interactions between communities. And when I say conflict, I don't just mean war or hostility. The conflict and friction can be cultural, it can be economic, it can be political, it can be social, it can be in terms of values, in terms of religion, it can be in terms of sheer expansion, and so forth and so on. And one of the major transformations that we're going to be looking at here is the invention of civilization, which occurs on the order of 3500 BCE. So everything before that is broadly characterized as prehistoric. One of the reasons for this is that one of the things that comes along with the invention of civilization is the invention of writing. And historians, unfortunately, in some ways, tend to be focused on records, information, documents, things that we can look at that are actually people talking to us from the past with words. And so this encourages some distortion because humanity did millions of years of things before the arrival of the invention of writing and the development of civilization. Prehistory is a period of crucial development of human social organization, as we'll see before long. But the invention of civilization inaugurates period. It ushers in this period in which human social organization becomes about the perfection of civilization. It becomes about the development of finding the ideal civilization, because civilization involves balance. It involves a dynamic between the problems of the freedom of the individual on the one hand, and the benefits of the community on the other hand. We'll be talking about this later on. And as a result, civilization is this very difficult equation, and the period after the invention of civilization involves constant experimentation to find the ideal balance between the individual and society. And the period in which this experimentation takes place is a period that builds up to some of the ultimate forms of civilization, the most complicated developments of civilization, which include the arising not only of the city and of the state, but of empires. And so the ultimate expression of that is the Roman Empire, and the fall of Rome is therefore the next dividing line. The period in which all of this experimentation with civilization and empire takes place is the ancient era. After this comes a period that is defined primarily by the relationship that humans have with religion and with religious institutions, and the role of religious institution and dogma in society. This is true all around the Mediterranean world, not just in the Western Europe, which is referred to as Christendom, but also in the Islamic and Byzantine world as well. And so this builds up to the next major transformation, which is the breaking of these monolithic institutions in a number of ways, one of which is the Protestant Reformation. The period in which this takes place is the 1,000 years of the medieval era. And then after this is the world of mass society, the modern era in which we find ourselves now, everything since 1450, 1500 CE. So these are the eras of history. These are the periods in which, the four periods in which humanity has been divided up into these chunks. And we are going to be concentrating on how the ancient era comes about and the transformations that take place during this period. Another way of looking at human history that is also helpful to us is in terms of the prevalent technology available. And this is very closely tied into the periods of social history, the periods in which humans organize each other, which are the eras that we've been talking about. And so the prehistoric era is also the era before the development of advanced technology. And so we go through an extremely long period in which we are in the Stone Age, the age in which the technology available to humans is literally what nature provides. And so, we have stone, we have, animal hides, we have bone, we have wood, and these kinds of things that humans make use of in a very, fundamental way. This escalates into the Neolithic or the New Stone Age. The primary distinction here, the what makes the New Stone Age or the Neolithic different from the Old Stone Age or the Paleolithic, is that in the Neolithic we are developing. We are using natural technology in order to try to develop in order to try to control nature, in order to try to advance on what nature provides to us. In other words, we're trying to develop agriculture. And it's during the Neolithic that the agricultural revolution takes place, the period in which people are trying to make the transition from mere survival into coaxing from the earth enough food for us to be able to depend on it, for us to be able to create a stable community in one place. And the culmination of that is the invention of civilization. Invention of civilization is essentially the successful ability to plant a city-state, to plant a community that is self-sufficient, that is able to feed itself. And there's a key component to this that we'll be talking about, which is that means that there has to be not just enough food coming out of the ground and out of domesticated animals to survive. The real revolution is to be able to have enough extra food to feed people that are not farming, to have specialized labor, to have the farms provide not just for the farming families themselves, but to provide for people that are free to do other things besides simply survive, besides simply generate food for themselves, that are free to work with stone and wood, that are free to work with documents, that are free to interact with the gods, that are free to do the specialized things that make possible a complicated social organization. And so one of the most important developments in technology is the ability to make new kinds of things, and in particular to be able to work with metal. And so with the invention of civilization comes metalworking. And the first major period of this is called the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age lasts until a climactic moment in which the Bronze Age economic powers build up to such greatness and such magnitude of economic power that the whole thing crashes down and collapses around 1100, 1000 BCE. The whole Bronze Age world smashes down to the ground. The Bronze Age ends, and what arises from that is a new world in the Mediterranean, a new world that is based around a different kind of technology that is based around iron. And we'll talk about why the Iron Age is so different from the Bronze Age. But the ancient era, after the invention of civilization, involves the culmination of the Bronze Age, its collapse, and then the reemergence of new civilizations, new kinds of economic power, new kinds of development in the Iron Age. And it's in the Iron Age that we get the greatest civilizations of the ancient world. The city-states of the Greeks and the empire of the Romans. One other thing that is intuitive for some and not for others, so I need to make sure that I talk about it here. When you're looking at counting centuries, so when you're counting years 1, 2, 3, 97, 98, 99, 100 from the beginning of the calendar, that is your first century. Your first century is the first 100 years, and so you get to the year 100. That's the last year of the first century, and likewise that keeps going. So the first century is the century that ends in 100 after 100 years. Another 100 years, you get to 200. That's the second century. Another 300 years. Another 100 years, so you get to 300, that's the third century, and so on, all the way up to the period we find ourselves in now. So the 20th century is the century that ends in 2000, 21st century that we're in now, century that ends in 2100. You take a particular event, like the swearing in of Barack Obama, which took place in January 2009, and that's going to take place in the 21st century. It's in that 100 years that ends in 2100. So the connection here is that the numbering of the century corresponds to the ending year of that century. Now, you remember that most of ancient history is taking place BCE, and that means we're counting backwards. And so we have the first century CE, second century, third century. If we start counting backwards, the centuries work in the same way. And so the first 100 years counting backwards is the first century. Another 100 years, you get to the second century, and so forth. And so you take a particular event, like when the Romans completely destroyed their enemy, the city of Carthage. This takes place in 146 BCE. That's within what we call the second century. And the reason I need to mention this is that sometimes we'll refer to, the particular years. Sometimes we'll refer to the second century, and you need to know that that's the century that has 200 to 101 within it, that has the 100s BCE in it. And these two things will be interchangeable, just like the 1900s is interchangeable with the 20th century. However you want to organize that in your head, however that makes sense to you, you just need to know what we're talking about if something comes up referring to the second century BCE. So periodization. Historians use history to use periodization to divide history into eras based on how we can characterize society. Archaeologists and other people that study technology of the past also divide up history. In this case, it's based on technology, and both of those are useful to us in the study of history. It has often been the case, and is still sometimes often the case, that historians and archaeologists don't always talk to each other. But the best way to understand history, to hear what the lives of people in the past are like, is to take a look at all of the possible available evidence, and we'll be talking more about evidence shortly. And so, this is a way of organizing the way we study history, but we just need to be aware that it makes possible overgeneralization within each period, and so you want to bear that in mind when you're taking a look at it. And that's that.